Welcome to the Rock and Roll Show podcast. We're here to share the thrill of experiencing live music together with strangers and with friends, and to get to know our guests a little bit better through their concert experiences. I'm your host, Alex Gadd, and I relate to people best when talking about music. Finding out what bands someone listened to and what shows they've been to allows us all to get to know and understand one another better. Also, hey, it's just fun to swap stories about shows we've seen over the years. Today's conversation should be a good one. Our guest is John Zilch. He's a chief product officer, also a professor of management information systems. We spent almost 2 years working together recently, and we talked about talking about music, but we never got around to it until now. So, John, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's a long time coming.
Yeah, really. Great to see you. So, let's start at the beginning. Where did you get your love of music? Give me your background musically.
Yeah, and I'm looking at your t-shirt, Alex. I think you may have, I don't know if you picked that based on your guest. I was a child of the 90s, really, or at least my formative years. So I know Guns N' Roses into the 80s, into the 90s, but, I grew up in the grunge period, alternative rock. And then as we turned into the 2000s, started to more of the indie rock stuff too. But, along the way, of course, explored classic rock and other genres as well.
Sure. So, did you get your love of music from your parents, or where did you pick it up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I may have been born with it because my mother enjoyed the Beatles, but I can't recall her ever listening to the Beatles around the house much. Uh, my father, wasn't a huge music fan, and I had friends that were really interested in music and would always tell me, you got to go play this record, this album. And then eventually, I would, and it was almost immediate. I just love listening to music, just almost from the get go.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to my story. I can remember a kid brought one of Kiss's records when it was released in 1976 into our second grade class. It was his older sibling's record, and put it on for show and tell. And I don't think the teacher was ready for what she heard. But it lit something up in me because my mom was way into the Beatles as well. My dad wasn't as much into music, so I was listening to top 40 radio, and then the Beatles and some Motown from my mom. Then I heard Kiss, and my world opened, and that was the beginning, just as you described, of friends sharing music with me and me sharing music with my friends as well. So that's great. Does that lead directly to your first concert? What was your first concert?
Yeah, great question. I was thinking about this when I knew I was coming on the show, um, and I listened to a couple of the other episodes you've done, and I know you're not a big fan of festivals. Do I have that right?
I'm
Uh,
not as big a fan of festivals, but that doesn't mean they're not great. It's not my thing. I don't like being that's a lot of work, a festival. You got to be there all
yeah,
day. It's too much time.
yeah. I had a friend who had an extra ticket to Radio 104 Fest in Western Mass, where I grew up. Excuse me, at an amusement park called Riverside Park. It's now Six Flags in
Mhm.
Agawam.
Mhm.
And he's like, "Hey, do you want to go?" And I don't think I think this is my first concert. I don't think I'd ever been to a concert. It was 1996. I was a junior in high school, or it was the summer, I guess, going into junior year. And yeah, we drove in. And if you want a good laugh, here was the lineup. Can I read you the lineup at this concert?
Yeah, I wanna hear it.
Festival? I love your reaction to some of these. Cracker, Everclear, Candlebox, Semisonic, The Refreshments, Dishwalla, Stabbing Westward, Local H, Lush, and that's the only one I don't really recall is Lush, and the Verve Pipe. So those were the headliners at this show.
That's a pretty that's a very specifically 90s show. I mean, you could almost wrap half those bands that are still around together and do a nostalgia tour with the same exact bands, and you get a great reaction. I'm sure you'd be able to sell out a bunch of amphitheaters doing that same type of lineup. Yeah, the Verve Pipe, by the way, one of my favorite bands.
No way, I didn't know that.
I truly love the Verve Pipe. The other ones, I also kind of liked Everclear. I really did
Yeah,
like Everclear. I liked Art. But other than that, those bands have all kind of are very stuck in the past for me. And so, yeah, that's a time capsule of mid 90s, alternative rock for sure.
yeah, yeah. It was kind of nostalgic to go back and see the lineup again.
Do you have a ticket stub from that still?
I don't know. And
Yeah,
I wish I had kept it. It was exciting. I mean, it was a good way to see several bands obviously in a row.
sure.
And I wish I had kept that though. That'd be neat.
So let's bookend that with your most recent concert. What was the most recent show you've seen?
Yeah. So I'm in a little bit of a drought. I've had to eat a couple tickets for other things that have come up. So actually the last show I've been to was end of the summer. Government Mule played in Boston. Are you familiar with them?
Sure.
I wasn't very familiar with them.
Warren
And
Haynes is one of the great guitarists alive today.
yeah, it was Allman Brothers. Is
He
it, have that
played
right?
with the Allman Brothers over
Yeah.
the last 20 years of the Allman Brothers. Yeah.
Yeah. It was incredible. I mean, they do this dark side of the mule, I think they call it, where they play Pink Floyd
Mhm.
and they start with their own songs. Then they shift over to a Pink Floyd set list. And I don't know how you are. I enjoyed that. Friend asked me to go with him. So I had no background on the band. In fact, I purposely didn't even listen to Government Mule leading up to it. So I
Mhm.
knew very little about him. I thought it would be kind of neat. I knew Dark Side of the Moon. So it was a great show. And then Jason Bonham opened with his Led Zeppelin tribute band, which
Yeah.
was awesome.
I saw Government Mule in the 90s, maybe 94 or 95. I was working for a friend of mine's band as a roadie, basically just an extra guy to help
Yeah.
lug equipment. And that band was very serious and they were on their way to getting signed. And they got a month long residency at CBGB's in New York. And every Thursday night, I think it was Thursday for a month. And one of those Thursdays was right before the MTV Video Music Awards in the city. And when we showed up at CB's, we were told that there was a band that was going to be headlining, going to play after us, and that their opening act was going to also play after us. So we were going to be the opening act. And the band was called Blessed Chloroform. And I thought, that's a
Right.
terrible
You know,
name. What
for
an awful name for a band. And what it ended up being is the Black Crows were in town for the Video Music Awards, and Government Mule was opening for them. So we opened the show and it was packed because it got out that morning who that was really playing. So CBGB's was packed to the gills and we opened, and then Government Mule came out and played, and then the Black Crows came out and tore the place down. They were so good.
wow.
And that was one of the most interesting nights of my life because I ended up standing side stage after we had cleared our equipment out, watching the Black Crows. And I turned to my left, and there's Dave Grohl just standing there. And I didn't say anything because I was trying to be cool and not hassle him while he's, doing his own thing, but I really should have talked to him. Whenever I hear Government Mule, that's what I think of.
Well, just a couple notes on that concert. They brought out vocalists for the couple of those Dark Side tracks, Great Gig in the Sky. I can't remember exactly which tracks they were, where you have the background
The women singers are wailing
Golden
away in the
Singers.
background. Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they travel with them or not, but they were exceptional. I mean, it was just one of those things that just takes your breath away to
Mhm.
hear that live. I had never heard that before. I haven't been to an opera or anything uh, close to that before, but to hear it was amazing. And it was pretty neat. The other thing I didn't know about Government Mule is I grew up again, like a big Pearl Jam fan. I didn't know they had such a hard edge to them. I thought they'd be more blues, kind of. He's a hard rocking dude. I loved it. It was a great show.
He's a hell of a player. All right. So have
Yeah,
you seen Pearl Jam live ever?
I have. I've probably seen them, I want to say 3 or 4 times. Might be a couple more than that, but at least 3 or 4 times.
Nice. And when was the
Yeah.
last time you saw them?
Ooh, yeah, it's probably, sadly, it's probably going back like 10 years. I'm overdue.
Yeah, you are.
Um, yeah, they're my favorite band. I need to get out and see them. They do such an incredible job.
Yeah, so I had never seen them. They're not my favorite band, but I really like them a lot. And
Yeah.
last year when we got together in Austin, I went down a day early. You were there, right? We met up for that event in Austin in
Yeah.
September of last year. I went down a day early, and my brother got me tickets. He lives in Austin, and we went and saw Pearl Jam the night before I saw you at that event.
Oh, that's
So that
great.
was my first time ever seeing them. Loved it. They were so good, and I was so disappointed in myself for waiting 30 something years to go see them. Yeah, so
Yeah.
go see them again. You hear the new record just got released this week, Dark Matter?
Yeah, I've listened to it a few times.
Yeah.
Really like it. I think
Yeah, me
they're
too.
it's amazing they continue just to produce the way
Mhm.
they do. I think it's
They
amazing.
they really are great.
Yeah.
So, of all the concerts you've seen, what's your favorite concert? Do you have one? Is there a way to quantify that?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a big show, not a big stadium. I went to the Paradise Rock Club when it was probably in the late 2000s. I somehow, convinced my wife to go, probably with like dinner ahead of time that I'm like, you're not going to love the show, and the band was called Wolf Parade. So, it's almost like a super group of Canadian indie rock guys,
Sure.
from different bands. And they've done a few albums now. They're probably still touring too. They've kind of broken up and got back together, done that kind of thing. So this was a tour from their first album, and just the energy they put into that show, small venue, and you could just tell they were burning calories.
Hmm.
Every note, every movement, just they were going for it. They were having fun. And at one point in the show, you just had this moment where the light was coming down, hit one of their, I think they have like two lead singers, and one of them plays piano. And he was just hunched over the piano. And I remember just seeing his silhouette as he was singing the song with just, sweat pouring off his head. And, it sounded magnificent. And that plus his energy, I don't know. I just always remember that moment. It was just such a great concert. And my wife ended up liking it too, which is probably the best part.
That is a win. Now, how did you know about this band ahead of time? Did you just take a flyer to go see it, or were you focused on going to see this live act?
My favorite thing to do is stumble upon new music. And even, before Spotify, I'll use today, I don't know. I was probably just like scanning the internet for like best of 2008 songs
Right.
and Consequence of Sound or some of those sites. And I probably came across one of their songs there and played it. Uh, and I do often try to find bands that are kind of on the upslope of their careers
Mhm.
and catch them early at the smaller venues. So that was probably part of the strategy there.
Yeah, that's smart. I've talked about this a couple of times on this podcast. It's so nice when you can get in early with a band and follow their trajectory upwards.
Yeah.
Um, Ideally, they do have an upwards trajectory, but it is fun to be able to say, I knew them when I saw them when. It is certainly fun to see a band that you catch on to that you know is great. There's a band like that for me right now. They're called Blackberry Smoke, and they are a southern
Oh,
rock band, all original music. They've written 8 albums, and they go out on tour every year, and I've been following them since 2012, and that was when they released their 2nd album. So I was in early with them and seen them at multiple stages. So if you get out and you get to see Blackberry Smoke, go check them out.
I'll be checking them out.
Yeah, they're great.
Gives me
Really good. If you
so
like Leonard Skinner and you like the Allman Brothers, they're an Atlanta-based rock band. They get grouped into country sometimes, but they're really a rock and roll band and a great
cool.
one. So I know the feelings. What was the name of the band that you saw at the Paradise?
Wolf Parade.
Wolf Parade. All right, I'll
Yeah.
see. It's good when I get something new to check out at the end of the show.
Yeah. Check out their first album, I think is probably their best.
Okay,
That's maybe where you want to start. They've been around longer than that. They were in other bands, kind of came together for
cool.
this venture.
I look
Yeah.
forward to it. All right, that sounds like a question I like to ask is, have you ever been surprised? Have you ever showed up at a show and just not heard anything about the bands? But that seems to be your general MO, is just to go in and be surprised one way or the other. Have you ever seen a show where you've been disappointed by the band?
There's been a couple that come to mind. I may have repressed the other ones from my memory, but uh, I feel a little bit bad saying this because they're one of my favorite bands. But I did see you two, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago, something
Yep.
like that.
On the
It,
anniversary tour for Joshua Tree was 7 or 8
I
years
think
ago.
you're right. Yes, it
Yeah,
was that. Yeah,
yeah.
and they were older too. They're getting up there. Even
Mhm.
then, I was with my wife, and the funny story there is we were getting something to eat beforehand. She's like, "Well, the show starts at 7." And I said, "I've been to a million of these concerts. They never start at 7. They're going to say that. That's when the opener goes on, and then another hour." And we get down to the TD Bank Garden, the food center, whatever you want to call it. And we walk in and there was literally no one in the hallways. And my first reaction was, this is the wrong night. The concert must be tomorrow or next week.
Right.
And I looked around, there's like maybe a ticket vendor, someone sweeping. And I said, it looked like the end of days. And all of a sudden I hear peace. And I'm like, wait a minute. And we go through these double doors and now all of a sudden the whole place is packed, and they're playing Where the Streets Have No Name. And it was powerful. And I got a dirty look from my wife saying like, yeah, you were really wrong here. But we found our seats. And I mean, the concert was good enough. I don't regret going, but it was not, they took a lot of breaks, played a lot of videos in between
Yeah.
every 2 or 3 songs to, I'm guessing, just like catch their breath, or maybe change instruments, whatever they need to do. So I wouldn't say it was a terrible show, but it just, sure, the expectations are higher,
Yeah.
for the band.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. When I was young, Kiss was my favorite band, but my other favorite band was Cheap Trick. And I didn't see
Oh,
them at the time either, but, I did see them starting about 10 years ago, and I got that they are my most disappointing concert only because I went in, they have so many songs they could play, and they play the tightest hour and 20-minute set you've ever seen, and then they just get off the stage, and I
yeah.
wanted more. So it's not that they were bad in any way, it's that they didn't play nearly long enough, which is disappointing. But it's always interesting because every one of these questions is open to interpretation. There are no right answers. But that's interesting. When you two, I saw that tour also, and I was I liked it. I mean, I love the band,
Yeah.
but it wasn't the most overwhelming thing I've ever seen. And I saw it at MetLife Stadium. So it was these four tiny little guys on this
Yeah.
giant stage with a giant video screen behind it, and they were almost overwhelmed by the environment that they were in.
Now, have you seen Cheap Trick, uh, outside of that and have enjoyed them?
I've
Or is
seen
that
them
the only?
twice, and it's been the same both times, but the second
Oh,
time I went just because 'cause I'm like, I know what I'm getting, and I love the band, and I love their music, so I'll go again anyway.
yeah, yeah.
But I won't go again. That twice was enough for that. Now, did you grow up as playing music, or do you play any instruments? Are you interested in playing instruments?
Yeah, funny you ask. So I again, no one in my family had any musical inclinations or anything. There was no instruments in my house. Um, but I've always had that itch. So I think when I was 19, I bought an acoustic guitar and, just played it off and on, and still play today. So, I've got a few guitars, but I still love playing just acoustic guitar. I love, exploring like chord progressions and doing things like that. Now I have a couple buddies that I play with as well. It's fun to jam with. So that's always been the guitar and I love it. One of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, me too. Good for you. That's great.
Yeah.
So, if you could go to see a show, any type of show, at a club, at an arena, at a stadium, in a festival, in a theater, in an amphitheater, what's your favorite room to see a show?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if it's my personality. Well, we've met in person, as you mentioned, and worked together. I'm tall. I'm 6'4". You're tall as well. So I don't know if you feel this, but I can get self-conscious if I'm in a seat and standing in front of someone who's shorter than me. And especially at a concert where you're trying to, see something in particular.
Right.
So, I mean, it doesn't wreck my experience, but it's in my head. So, going to a club where there's just general admission, you can stand where you like, you can find the right angle of, where you want to be. Um, that's definitely more my style. I love the clubs, checking that out. I think it's just more intimate too. Like you mentioned with you too, just see, four small figures amongst the screen. So yeah, that'd probably be my preference.
Yeah. I it's funny. I like going to clubs more, but it's so hit or miss, and I've seen so many
Yeah.
misses at shows at clubs where if you go to an arena, you pretty much know who you're going to see. There are no surprises. So it's six of one, half a dozen of the other for me. I've just seen so many more shows in arenas than I have
Yeah. Yeah.
in clubs. Although For about 5 years after college, I saw almost all my shows in clubs, and that's what I mean by I'd see some great shows and I'd see some terrible shows. So, it's hard to say for me, but I went to a club on Saturday night and saw a band that played all original music with a hockey theme, and it sounded not so great because I'm not a huge hockey fan. I'm just a Rangers fan, but I don't really love hockey
Yeah.
the way these guys do. They were great, the Zambonis, and I have the lead singer of the Zambonis coming on the podcast soon as well.
Well, nice,
Um,
nice, nice.
it's such a good show. You can be really surprised as well in the positive way. So clubs are still my preference, I guess. Certainly, they're cheaper than going to see a show in an arena these days as well. Do you have a favorite concert venue specifically that you've been to and yet you like to go to or you want to go back to?
Sticking with the club theme, the Paradise in Boston and in the Middle East in Cambridge. I don't know if you've been there, Alex, or heard of it.
No.
And like I mentioned, I had some friends that played music that I was close with in high school and still play. So back when they would come out to Boston, they would play at the Middle East, typically upstairs, not in the main room, but
Mhm.
it was a lot easier when I lived in the city too. You can just walk down the street, to your point, pay $15 for a ticket. It was kind of nice. So, but yeah, those would probably be the two spots that I'm, most drawn to.
Nice. My daughter lives in Cambridge right now, so maybe I'll
No,
go meet up with her and we'll go
yeah.
to a show at the Middle East. Do you have a venue you've been to that you just didn't like at all?
Well, it's probably again tied to I've got super long legs, and Fenway Park, whether it's baseball or a concert, can be rough. They don't want to make any changes because they're grandfathered into an old fire code, so they can
Right.
squeeze a lot of seats in there, which can be tight. So I saw the Police there back in the late 2000s, and it was a pretty good show. But like Fenway, you're always kind of turned a different way. There's depending on where you're sitting, there could be like, pillars in front of you.
Right.
And honestly, I lived in a building next to Fenway Park for a year or two, and all the residents would go up on the roof and we would watch shows from up there. And it was really neat, obviously kind of congregate, hang out, socialize, but also hear the show with pretty, good audio too. So I was used to that, which is ironic. I'd probably rather be there than inside the actual stadium. But for that show, it was a little rough.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now,
Yeah.
where's the venue you've attended the most concerts? Is it the Paradise?
Much to your point, I think it's probably arenas because the bands that I most want to see are gonna go there. And in fact,
So TD
to answer your
Garden?
question, it's probably TD Garden. And I
Yeah.
saw Stone Temple Pilots there. It was probably in the late '90s, and Cheap Trick opened, one of your favorites. And
Yeah.
it was really interesting because we sat in our seats. We got there early, and there was like there was maybe like three guys and their sons. So it was three adults, three kids sitting there and watching Cheap Trick play. And to be honest, I had heard the name, but I had never heard their music. And they were pretty good. They were the opener. And as soon as they finished, those guys got up and just left. They didn't even stick around for some several pilots. So I always had them too, which I thought was like, oh gosh, there's some real ardent fans of Cheap Trick around.
We're old, but we're around.
Sure.
We haven't died off yet. I saw my first show there last year. I took my daughter for her birthday to see Greta Van Fleet there just
Oh
in September or October. It was great, great venue, great sight lines. You can see from
yeah.
anywhere. Big, but not too big. A really nice show.
Yeah. Yeah. They do a good job, good acoustics in there. I've seen the Killers there too. STP a few times. Like I said, you two a couple times as well.
So, thinking about recordings of live music now, do you have a favorite live album? Do you even think in terms of albums anymore, or is that a thing of the past for you?
I do. In fact, you mentioned Pearl. I was wondering the other day, I was like, funny that artists still come up with albums. I'm happy that they do. I enjoy the packaging of an album. So recorded live music, ooh, that's a tough one. I'd say it's probably a tie between two unplugged albums that I just love. And I collect vinyl records, and I've been meaning to get both of these on vinyl at some point. Which are Nirvana Unplugged,
Mhm.
which is more the, that's kind of a
Seminal,
classic.
seminal unplugged record.
Yeah. I mean, the covers they choose, right? It's like
Great.
a little thought that David Bowie. Uh, so there's that one. Also, Jay-Z Unplugged, which I love. I do enjoy hip hop as well. I haven't been to a hip hop concert yet, but I enjoy that genre. And I think he's got I don't know if you've heard it.
I have.
Yeah, he's got the roots behind him, and just to listen to the music, the bass and everything, it's just so perfect.
Yeah.
If you don't want to listen to Jay-Z, who's also unbelievable, and he's got Mary
Yeah.
J. Blige on the album. So it's just, I don't know. It's almost up there with Nirvana for me. It's another seminal record.
I'll have to give that another listen. I only heard it once, or I think I even just well, I don't remember how I heard it the first time, but I like Jay-Z. I mean, I'm not a huge hip hop fan, but I do like Jay-Z.
When you're a New Yorker, you have to. There's no,
Right, and he's a great representation of the city, so, much respect to, Jay-Z. How about
yeah.
concert films? Do you ever even think in terms of for people who got into music in the '90s, I'm not sure concert films have the same weight that they did for us before MTV. I got into concert films in the late '70s when I was young because there was no other way to see a band. You know,
Oh, interesting.
you could
Yeah.
go to a
Yeah.
concert, but I was too young for that, but there was no
Right.
way to visually see a band other than going to a concert unless they put out a concert film, so there was Led Zeppelin, Song Remains the Same, and the bands The Last Waltz and things like that, and so for I still ask the question, I don't know that for younger people it matters that much. I don't think it really resonates.
Well, I'll cheat a little bit if that's okay. And I'll tell you, there was a phase where I watched it all the time, and I need to go back and watch it, which isn't a movie or a concert. But have you ever seen this show? And to be honest, I've never heard anyone talk about it. It's called Later with Jules Holland.
Sure. 5 bands a night.
Yeah. And they would rotate around. I think you had
Mhm.
5 stages. And I discovered so much new music through that show. And I could just watch it all day. Then they
Yeah.
play a couple songs in it. I don't think they were competing so much, but I'm guessing they're playing in front of each other, right? Their bands stay out there. So there was a little bit of, you got to bring it. And the vibe of it, I loved watching that. Outside of that, I mean, Pearl Jam again, they've got, one where they kind of talk about their concert at Wrigley Field the year that Cubs won the World Series.
Right.
That was a good one too. That was more of a documentary than a concert
No,
film. So
that's a kind of a concert film, sure, and Eddie Vedder being such a huge Cubs fan made it a really legit, solid thing. I really like that one.
now I got a question for you, Alex. I've got queued up Talking Heads. What's their famous
Stop
one?
Making Sense, unbelievable.
I
Such
just
a
go watch that right now. Just
You should go watch that right after we are done. It is so good. I don't love the Talking Heads, but
yeah,
boy, I love that movie. They are so good in it. You'll love that. It is fantastic, and it makes their songs, which sound a little static on their records for me, in my
yeah,
taste, it
yeah.
really loosens them up, and they sound funkier and cooler. It's a great show.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that
Yeah.
out.
Is there a concert venue you'd like to go to that you haven't been to yet?
Yeah, again, going to college in the '90s, I think every dorm room had Dave Matthews Band live from Red Rocks. As silly as it sounds, just seeing the picture on the cover, it was almost like didn't look like any other venue that I had seen live or otherwise. So yeah, Red Rocks is probably up there in terms of bucket list venues, I'd
Yeah,
say.
number 1 answer on this show is Red Rocks from me,
Yeah.
and almost every guest has said that except for my friend Russ who was on, and he's been there, so it wasn't a bucket list thing for him. Yeah,
Ah,
that's
okay.
we sh let's find a show, we'll go together.
Let's do it. And if we
Yeah,
can, for the field trip, maybe all your guests will all go with you. And
field trip would be wonderful. That would be great. If you could see any band that's alive, who would it be that you haven't seen yet?
that's alive.
Yeah.
Um, well, I was going to say Zeppelin, but obviously they're not.
Alright,
They're
well,
not
no, that's fine. So any band live
like
or dead, the answer is?
live or dead. I'd go Zeppelin. I guess alive. There's another indie band. They used to be kind of a really hardcore emo band called Foxing. They're more indie now. They kind of toned it down a little bit, but they're really, really good. And I bought tickets. I had tickets and I had to eat them. Probably like 5 years ago. So waiting for them to come back around. They're definitely on my bucket list. They put on an amazing show for everything I've heard.
Foxing?
Foxing, Foxing. Yeah.
I will check that out.
Real good
Now
rock band. If you like rock and roll, you'll like them as well.
I do, and I can't wait. If have you ever met a famous rock star? Or
No. I guess the closest I came is my friends who have a band played right in the middle of COVID outdoors in Western Mass on a pouring rain night. And it was both the coolest thing and a little bit sad too, because they opened for Sponge, who was a 90s staple, who
Yep,
I think are vastly overrated. They're still making music today.
yep.
And they showed up. They showed up on a bus, played under like a 10 by 10 tent canvas. And, I was basically like leaning against the air watching them. And it was just like, oh my God, like, how am I this close to this band that I just idolized when I was a kid? And I know every song and every lyric and all this stuff. So I didn't get to meet them. They did have an opportunity to meet them, but I was kind of hanging out with my buddies. Plus, I don't know what I would say, it'd be a little, I don't know if that's playing too close to the sun, as they say.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've met a number of rock stars, and I try to say as little as possible, except I got to know Trey from Fish pretty well, and
Yeah.
so we talked more like friends. Not deep, deep, intense friends, but we got to know each other. I'd stayed at his house before, so other than Trey, I don't think I've really ever had an in-depth conversation with our musician, but I've met a number of them. And the funniest thing was when I was 12, I went to see the Rolling Stones in 1981 with my mom because I couldn't go by myself, still a little young. And we got backstage because I have family who are music journalists and got us backstage passes. And we got to meet everyone in the band except Mick. And my mom ended up having like a half-hour conversation with the bass player, the original bass player, Bill Wyman, about art and museums in New
Oh,
York and
that's
in
wild.
London. And I was like, "Mom, you're ruining this. Stop being you're such a square." But she actually was the cool one because she was able to have a conversation with a rock star
Yeah.
that wasn't about fawning over them or,
It's about
talking
their,
about their hits. Looking forward, do you have any tickets to see concerts this year?
no, I want to see Krungbin. They're coming around. Ben Howard is someone I actually discovered in that Jules Holland show. And then to tie back to your question earlier, I was able to convince my friend to play at my town's Porch Fest, where people drive around to different people's front yards and watch shows for a half hour. So we're going to play, and that's both frightening but also really exciting at the same time. So trying to gear up for that and figure out what the heck we're going to do.
Wait, so you're gonna play with him?
Yeah, we're going to play together. I'm gonna go out and find a singer and a drummer. We're just gonna kind of figure it out. So play originals, so no one will know how bad we are. We won't mangle someone else's songs.
Have you played live before this?
Never.
This will be your first gig.
First time ever. Yeah.
Well, if you need some help, give me a call. I'll come up and play with you.
Be careful. We're heavily recruiting. I
I'm
might take you
happy
up
to
on
do
that.
it. I'm
That'd be
looking to
great.
play out, so that'd be great. And then do you have a concert that you'd like to go see this year that you don't have tickets for yet? I'm gonna guess Pearl Jam is on that list.
Pearl Jam's definitely on that list. I know, like, as I said, Ben Howard's coming around and he's great, and want to see that one. Trying to think what else is out there. Oh, Metallica. Metallica's coming. Have you seen them, Alex?
I have once. I saw him with Guns N' Roses in '92. Yeah, that the one time seeing Metallica, but if you're gonna see him once, it's on the Black Album tour. It was great.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Mhm.
So I saw them once as well, but it was a strange experience. It was at Dreamforce, which is
Oh, yeah.
Salesforce's
Yeah, yeah.
annual
Well,
conference.
they're a San Francisco-based band, so it makes sense that
Yeah.
they do it in Dreamforce is in San Francisco.
And they're very good friends, I guess, with the CEO, Mark Benioff. But it was very strange because you have IT consultants walking around who have no interest in Metallica, just like a totally different, so they weren't really paying attention to the band. And it
Mhm.
took me a little bit out of my element as a concert goer. So I'd like to see them in a place where people are there to to actually take in Metallica. So they're coming to Gillette in August, and looking forward to that one as well. And then the National, they're a New York band, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if you're a fan or you've seen them.
I don't know their music all that well. The dude has a
Mhm.
very distinct, deep voice. Like, it's a
Yeah.
very unique and interesting sounding. I need to get more into them, but they're on tour this year?
I think they're on tour. They had an album, but a lot of people call them sad dad rock, which is,
Yeah.
a little bit. So I tried really hard to not like that band. And the more I listened to them and just had them on in the background, I just became a fan. I went totally the other side. So I've heard they do a good live show. So they're on my list too.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I think one of the dudes in that band writes with Taylor Swift occasionally as well.
Yeah, produced the album that came out Friday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Word of it.
Right. So, last question before I let you go. You're wearing a t-shirt. Can you tell me about that t-shirt?
Yes, actually, it ties to Taylor Swift. So we went to the Taylor show. We being my wife and I have twin daughters who are 11, and they are total Swifties. So we went to the show at Gillette Stadium last May, where it was a total rainout. I mean, a washout, like pouring rain for 3, 4 hours, however long she played. But before she went on, there was this artist named Phoebe Bridgers who came on, and really, I loved it. It was another surprise. I knew nothing about her. Really liked her songs. Thought there was like really great classic like songwriting. And she said, I'm gonna buy a t-shirt here, but I'm gonna do something a little different. I'm not gonna get the Taylor Swift one. I'm gonna support the opening act. So yeah, it's a Phoebe Bridgers t-shirt with her scorpion and
Yeah, I love her.
yeah,
I think she's extremely talented and due
yeah.
for greater success in the future. She's definitely on that trajectory upwards.
Yeah, I hope so. I would imagine so. She's super talented.
So talented. Well, hey, John, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining me. Anything else I need to cover? Anything else you want to talk about? Anything you want to promote?
Gosh, I mean, I know a couple of your guests have said it, but go out and support live acts. Go to the ones in your town, the small ones playing at in bars, right? And be surprised. I think it's the best way to discover new music and support the arts. I think it's really important.
Couldn't agree more. And even go to porches when your town
Go
does
to
Porch
porches.
Fest.
Yeah, it's free. What can you lose?
That's good. Well, hey, John, thanks again. And that's it for today's conversation. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be back next Tuesday. And if you like what you heard today, we'd appreciate it if you would subscribe or follow to make sure you get notified about every new episode. And please tell your friends. Additionally, we want to know what you think. Please leave us a comment and we'll try to respond to every one of them. The Rock and Roll Show podcast is a World Highway Media production. I'm your host, Alex Gadd. And until next time, I want to remind you that life is short. So get those concert tickets. Thanks.